Are you thinking about buying a home, but you're a little overwhelmed by the process? I have a video that's going to go over the process in a little more detail. I did a video recently that if you've seen that one, and that's why you're coming to this one, just so you know, this is the more in-depth version, but it's still not going to take all day, I promise. So let's just get started here. So I want to go over this buyer guide, which I'm more than happy to provide to anybody at any time. I can email it to you or even send it to you in a text message in California, because that is where I am. And there may be other places in the country that are different. Some things are the same, but there's a lot of stuff that's different. So, and let me just say first that one of the things, so as an example, one thing that's always the same that I've heard from other agents across the country, because I have a great network of other agents too. So by the way, if you're in any other state, I work with other wonderful real estate agents in basically almost any area that you can think of. I've got somebody who's close by and can help you out, and they'll be specialized for your area, right? So one of the things that might be pretty specifically all over the place would be your final walkthrough. I don't know that there's any place that isn't going to not just allow you, but should be encouraging you to walk through the home that you're purchasing within a couple of days, if not the same day as you are going to be closing on that property. Why? Because a lot of stuff can happen between the last time you saw it, which was probably the inspection, and the actual closing date. Okay, so let's get into this now. So let's talk about the actual process. What are the rules? One of the first things I want to talk about is the new buyer's agency agreement rule. There's always been a buyer's agency agreement. That's always been a possibility. But I can tell you, for somebody like me who's been doing this for 26 years, it wasn't widely used. The more common practice for buyer's agents was that we, and I do listings and buying, I'm 50-50, 60-40, depending on the year. So, but as a buyer's agent, I rarely had anybody sign anything because most people didn't. But recently there was a lawsuit that happened, and I'm not going to get into the whole boring details of it, but the end result was that the agreement came about that basically, as far as I know, every state in the union, including ours, now requires a buyer's agency agreement. So if you're wanting to go look at a home and you're like, oh, I just want to go take a look at it, and someone's saying, okay, well, we need to sign this agreement first, and you're like, well, wait a minute, I never had to do that before. You're right, you didn't, and now you do. It is literally the law. So in California, the law is, and I'm not an attorney, but what I am told that I'm supposed to do. So the law is that you have to get it signed as soon as is practical. And the rules for all of our multiple listing associations, these are the rules that we have to go by as realtors so that we can continue to practice, are that we must get it signed prior to entering a property, either with you, excuse me, or on your behalf. So on your behalf, obviously meaning like, say, a virtual tour or something like that. So I'm going to go take a video for you because you're in North Carolina and you're going to be, you want to buy maybe a desert home and maybe just a vacation home or something like that. So you're not here. That happens a lot here because we don't have, about 50% of our population is snowbirds, or they're coming from out of state or something like that. So we do a lot of stuff remotely. And so it is not that uncommon for me to go and actually just show somebody a house with a video. But here's the thing, I actually still have to get something signed. But keep this in mind too. So when it comes to buyer's agency agreements, they work a little differently than a listing. So a listing, we're going to put a lot of money into it and all these different things. So it's going to probably last a little bit longer. It's going to be a little bit more solid, if you will. A buyer's agency agreement can be flexible. Again, I'm talking about my area in California, and I'm also talking about me and how I do things. Other agents, if they want to sign only exclusive buyer's agency agreements, that is their business and that is up to them. And it's totally their call. My personal opinion, the way that I do it, is that if you don't know me very well, and I wouldn't, if I was on your side of things, I wouldn't want to sign this exclusive long agreement that would take me 30 days to get out of if I didn't think that you were working hard for me or whatever the case may be. So when I first meet somebody and we first get started, All I ask for is an agreement for the property or properties that I'm showing, as long as it's not more than 3, because that's what the agreement is. That we have a buyer's agency light, we call it. And I do non-exclusive, and I just do it for a few days. It's sort of a try me out kind of agreement. So if you want to keep going, if you think I've done a good job for you, then we can look into longer agreements at that time. But keep in mind, the longest agreement we can have here in California for a buyer's agency agreement for buyers, listings are different, for buyer's agency is 3 months. It's the longest one you're going to sign. And if we still haven't found anything, we would have to sign another one or extend the one that we have. So just something to keep in mind. So we don't have to, get married right out of the gate. All we have to do is just, have that first initial agreement. Now, what will that agreement say? It will say the areas that I'm searching for you in, and it will say, and here's the big part that everybody asks about. How much commission am I going to make? So what we will talk about at that time is how much I will make and how much I'm also willing to let slide. So something that we can talk about in person in more detail, but I can also tell you that so far, I have not found too many instances where the buyer actually ends up paying the buyer's agent. The old way of doing things was the listing agent and the would come to an agreement on an amount of commission. And then in the multiple listing service where all the agents look, we get our showing instructions and all of the things that we need to know are in there. It's also where every single website pretty much with real estate on it, that's where they're getting their information. All of it is a pull from our multiple listing service. So anything you see on Zillow, anything you see on Trulia, if it's my listing or anybody else's listing, we put in that information. We paid for the pictures, we did all the stuff, and it's just going out to all these different websites. So all of it originates in the multiple listing service, and that's where we used to see as buyer's agents how much we would receive. So hey, buyer's agent, if you bring me the buyer and we close on this transaction, I will give you X amount of the commission that I am making. That's the listing agent who's put the listing in. That's how we used to get paid. That does not happen anymore. There's nothing in there about the buyer's agency commission. So now how it works is that we are going to make an offer, and inside that offer, everything that we used to put in is still going to be there. And let's say you want to ask for closing costs, that can include your buyer's agent's commission as well. And so far, that's pretty much how most of these have been written up. And I have yet to hear of any where that didn't come to fruition, where the seller didn't, if they're going to, if they're sitting on the market for a while, likely they're probably going to go ahead and pay the commission, just like they would be likely to pay closing costs. And just like they probably, they would have paid it before. And all this change took place in August of 2024. So I digress, but it's a big change. So I really wanted to sit on this one for a little bit because I want to make sure that everybody understands that the old way of doing things, it isn't just that everybody, kind of tightened up all of a sudden and said, well, now we have to have a buyer's agency agreement. Like we actually have to now. So there just isn't going to be any question about it. So that's the old way of doing things. The seller paid X amount of commission. The buyer's agent got a portion of that. I think most sellers understand it's still going to work that way. It just is going to work in a little bit different process, right? So instead of agreeing to it with the listing agent, and then it was inevitable, and at the end of the day, that's what got paid. Now, it's just part of the offer. So the seller says, oh, okay, so I've already agreed to pay my listing agent, which is normally half of what the listing agents used to ask for, because it's still just their side of things that are going to get paid. And then the seller looks at it and says, okay, here's the offer. In other words, maybe this will make more sense. The net to the seller will likely be the same now as it was then, which is why most sellers are still, generally speaking, seem to have been fine with paying it so far. Now, if we ever got into a really super seller's market again, we might see things go a little differently. So anyway, so back to this. So let's just keep going on this aspect here. So new home buying rules. That's That's the gist of it, right? And this just goes into a little bit more, like I said, explanation for it. So now let's get to the fun part, which is the house hunting. So looking for a home, there's a lot more inventory right now. We've spent a lot of years as agents with this sort of, you know, you got to just practically, some house comes on the market that your buyer's been looking for. You might be in the middle of a bite of your oatmeal and you've got to just drop your spoon and run, because if you don't get those people out to, not really, but if you don't get those people out to see that house, it's going to go. And so that it's honestly, it was a little stressful. And I would say we had a good solid 6 years of that, where if you're working with a buyer, it was just kind of like exhausting. Like if you ever wanted to go to your kid's soccer game or something, and then all of a sudden the house came on the market, you just kind of had to run and go show that house, because you certainly, needed to make sure that your buyers had an appropriate chance at it anyway. We don't have that right now. Even on some of the better homes, a lot of them are sitting. Why? Because of the interest rates. But what does that do for you as a buyer? And I'm recording this of March of 2025, just FYI, so something to keep in mind. But what does that do for you as a buyer? What it does for you is, yes, the interest rates are higher. And there's this whole, marry the house, date the rate. You'll hear people saying that. And well, it's kind of sounds salesy, and I don't really like the term that much. But at the end of the day, it's kind of true. Why do I say kind of? Because it's not necessary. I can't guarantee you that that rate's going to go down. I can't. It could. Right now, they're hovering right around 7, give or take, but it may stay there. But here's the other thing. It also might go up. So if you're ever looking to purchase a home, usually the best time to do that is when you're ready, when you can afford it. Trying to time the market with, over the years, the homes that I've bought, let's see, that's been 4 or 5, I want to say. I've had good luck with that. And I've had bad luck with that as far as timing the market. Had a couple times where I would have made a lot more money if I would have waited 1 more year to sell. I had a couple times where I nailed it. But you know what? I didn't let the timing stop me from doing what was best for me and my family. We moved forward with what we wanted to do as long as we could afford it. So I think that's really the thing to keep in mind. So even if the rates go up, from where they are right now, they still wouldn't be quite as high as where they were when I bought my first house in 1997. So, it's perception. It's what does everything look like right now? And I would say that no matter what, in 5 or 10 years from now, you're going to look back at the price that you have locked in, and whether or not you were able to refinance because the rates went down. Maybe you can, maybe you can't, because maybe they just won't go down. But if they do, you can. And, in theory, as long as everything, you haven't lost a job or anything, may heaven forbid. But all of that to say that you will likely be the person that people are talking to and go, if only I would have bought a house back when you did, right? And even people right now who own homes and they're not moving because they don't, and I get it, because you don't want to leave your really good rate to go to another rate, but you're also, maybe you're not seeing your grandkids and that time is passing, and you're never going to get that back, right? I mean, these are just considerations to say that it's not just about the interest rate. That's all I'm saying. They're going to go up, they're going to go down. Get the house that's right for you. The homes are almost always going to make money. Even homes that went down during the Great Recession that I sold, I still saw those people who had owned the homes for a while do very well. And then people who bought the homes right beforehand, as long as they waited out that dip and it came back up, they also did fine. They did great. That's just something, homes are to be long term. They're not stocks to be traded on a daily kind of basis. You got to think of it as the long term, and how is it going to work for you and your family, and are you going to make money in the long run? And the answer is yes. So back to looking for a home and buying a home. We do have a lot more homes sitting on the market right now. Again, that's because of the interest rate. that is good for you as a buyer. You have more leverage. You can come in, you can make, you can make whatever offer you want, but you can usually get the sellers to help maybe by reducing the price of the house, but also, sometimes in certain circumstances, contributing to you being able to buy down your interest rate, right? You might actually, if you ask for 20 grand from the seller off the price of the house versus maybe, and this is a conversation you would need to have with the lender, but maybe taking the money to buy down your interest rate, that can save you more money over the long haul and more money in your pocket on a day-to-day basis because your payment's going to go down. Another thing to consider too is that one of the things that you will have to come up with when you're buying the home is not just the down payment. I mean, unless you're paying cash for the whole thing, and even then, of course, you have to come up with this too. You're also going to come out of pocket with closing costs. So you're going to have two out-of-pocket expenses that go towards your loan. Closing costs, which are costs for, say, escrow, title, the lender fees, prepaid taxes and insurance, things like that. That's money out of your pocket at the time of closing. So is your down payment. The seller cannot make your down payment for you, but they can pay your closing costs. So you can consider the fact that perhaps you would do better by leaving money in your pocket and asking for the seller to pay that instead of asking for 20 grand off the price of the house, which is only going to save you, I don't know, a couple bucks a month. So, and where the other one could save you, thousands and thousands of dollars that you just get to still have in your bank account when you go to close. So these are things to consider. So there's also some new construction things too, and that's a whole other video. But just keep in mind, if you are looking at new construction, I have a whole video about that as well that I think you will find very interesting. So once you've been looking for a home and you find the one that you like, now let's move forward now that I've talked about all that aspect and why homes are sitting on the market longer. That's why. So let's say you found the home you like and you are ready to make an offer. Keep in mind that our contracts here are long in California. A lot of it is disclosures, though. To be perfectly frank, a lot of it is disclosures. There's about 17 pages of what we call boilerplate, that is the Residential Purchase Agreement, or you might hear it referred to as an RPA. In addition to that, you have agency disclosures, fair housing disclosures, wire fraud disclosures. Before you ever wire any money, you always want to double check that it's going to the right spot. And if we get to that point, I'm going to also remind you in an email, once you actually have the offer accepted, I always send out an email talking about all the different next steps that you need to do when they're due, all these things. And one of the things I will remind you in that email is to, before you wire those funds to escrow, you call escrow with the number that I give you, because it's the right number. And then you say, hey, I'm going to wire my funds. I just want to double check that I have the right information so it doesn't go off into some other accounts. Very scary to me. I can't even imagine what people have had to go through when they've lost huge chunks of money on a wiring fraud scam. Just be aware they're out there. Don't lose any sleep, because all you have to do is just double check and verify. And then once you have, you're good. And then we make sure that they got it and you're off and running. So here's what we're going to be talking about once you're ready to make an offer. Would love to have some time with you in person or on Zoom to go off over the offer, but these are the things we're going to discuss. So price, how much do you want to pay? The loan amount, or are you getting cash? Because I need to structure the offer differently for one versus the other. If it's a loan, I'm going to be checking with your lender to make sure that we have got, that you're not paying any points, because if that is ever left blank, that could actually harm your contingency. Also, we're going to be talking about the interest rate, like sort of your max that you're willing to go up to, because that can change through escrow, all those kinds of things. We're going to talk about the down payment, how much are you putting down, when would you like to close, the typical close time is about 30 days. If it's any shorter or longer, it's usually good to have an explanation for the seller so they understand why we're asking for that. But just so you know, 30 days is pretty typical. And that's about what it takes to close with the lender and what they're doing. Contingencies. So here's something to keep in mind. So one of the things you're going to do is you're going to put down what's called earnest money. So earnest money in the desert is customarily 3%. So let's use a $500,000 house, for example. So you make an offer and the seller accepts. Within 3 business days, you're going to put into escrow $15,000 for earnest money. It's your good faith deposit. However, your contingencies protect that deposit. So it will be $15,000 contingent on my approval of the inspection, of the homeowners association documents, of the seller's disclosure documents that you're going to, all of those things. It's going to be contingent on all of those things. We've got about 17 days by default to do all of that, to do all your due diligence. You can check everything out. You can kick the tires, make sure this is the house you want to buy, and then you can move on from there. If you like it, and let's say you did an inspection and everything was fine, or it wasn't, but the seller's willing to fix it. So there's all these different scenarios, which we will go over a little bit more in detail. Your protects your earnest money. Really all the contingencies there for, to be perfectly honest. I mean, otherwise you could just not buy it, and there's no teeth to it. So the earnest money gives a little bit of teeth to it, but just keep in mind, until you have removed those contingencies, they're still in place. They don't just go away. You actually have to remove them in writing. And once you've gotten past certain milestones, like we're fine with the home inspection, different things like that. And actually the paperwork for the home inspection says that if you are fine with it, that kind of is automatically removed. Again, I don't want to go into too much detail of this, but you get the idea. So contingencies are important because, again, they protect your earnest money. That is their whole job, basically. So we're also going to talk about, in the original offer, what stays with the property. Refrigerators are 50-50, for instance. So sometimes they're going to stay, sometimes not. Here in the desert, we have a lot of second homes. So there's a lot of people who are selling who they don't want the furniture. Like maybe they want some of it, but for the most part, it's more of a pain for them to have it all removed than to just leave it for you. So we have a lot of personal property that happens in the desert that doesn't happen in a lot of other places. That's pretty normal and something that we can talk about as it comes. But still, it's something to keep in mind. What stays, what doesn't. Typically, anything that's attached to the property stays. And I will give you an example. There can be a shed in the backyard that even looks to be attached to the property, but it's really not. That could be considered personal property, and the seller may take it, and you show up and you go, "Where's my shed?" And we didn't write it in, but that's why it went. Or I've actually written in that all the refrigerators stay. That's actually the default language of the contract. And then the sellers took the fridge. Like, hello, where's our fridge? That one was supposed to stay. Anyway, these are the kind of things that we want to talk about, make sure that everybody's clear. That's what contracts are for. So what doesn't stay? So let's say this happens a lot. There's a particularly nice chandelier in the front entrance, and maybe it's been passed down through family members. And the seller says, "I'm going to take the chandelier when I move out." That's fine, as long as it's in the contract that it is excluded. So it's something that we'll want to keep in mind. Okay, moving along. What you'll need for the offer. We've already talked about some time to go over it. If you're getting a loan, we must have a pre-approval letter. And whether you're getting a loan or cash, we need proof of funds. If you're getting a loan, you need proof of funds for the down payment that you've said you're going to make. You need to show that you have that money, and you need to show that it's in an account that's accessible. Okay, it cannot be under your mattress. I can't stress this enough. If you have money under your mattress right now and you want to go buy a home with it, you need to take it out and you need to put it in a bank account if you're getting a loan, so that the powers that be who are looking over your loan can see that this money has been seasoned. In other words, it needs to be in your bank account for at least 2 months for the lenders to consider it as seasoned funds. You have more questions about that, we can go into more detail, and it's actually probably even better for you to go into more detail with your lender. But just keep that in mind. We have to have accessible funds, like cash value life insurance policy. That is not soup, it's accessible. But let's say you're using it for earnest money. That actually happened to me one time. people, that's what they were going to use. And it took them over a week to get the funds. And when is the earnest money due? It's due in 3 days. The seller can kick you out if you don't have that money in at the time that you need to get it in. So this is something to keep in mind. Proof of funds that your money is accessible for the down payment and all the closing costs, so that people know that you can perform. So page 1 of an official bank statement is perfectly fine for proof of funds. An official letter on bank letterhead from the manager of the bank saying that you have sufficient money to cover X, right? So whatever that is. So we get the offer accepted, moving right along. So the buyer, you wire the funds to your earnest money funds to escrow. Escrow gives you those instructions. And then what are you going to do before you wire? You're going to call escrow and you're going to confirm those funds. Because how does wire fraud happen? Some thief sends you an email that makes it look like it's from the escrow company and it's not. They're pretty good about sending you secure emails, but just FYI, keep all of that in mind because I never want anybody that I know who's watched any of my videos to ever be defrauded on that. It's just heartbreaking. So you're going to want to hire a home inspector. I've got people I can refer to you. Maybe you know somebody that you want to use. Those run between about $350 and $550 on average. They can be higher. I've seen them be higher. Usually it's more extensive home inspection, and by all means, it's, but you really want to make sure and get that home inspection regardless. So once we have the home inspection, you're going to decide if you want to ask for any repairs. And if you do, most people do, what do you want to ask for? And then we can put that down in writing. The seller will respond. They don't have to be perfect. They don't have to respond at all. And if they don't respond and you get to your day 17 and they're just like, we're not going to fix anything. And you're like, well, I'm not going to buy the property then you can back out and keep your earnest money. So you haven't removed your contingency, of course. I mean, obviously there could be some caveats to all of this. Specific situations apply. But as I'm saying it, you haven't removed your contingency. You've done everything you're supposed to do. You've asked the seller to fix something. They either didn't respond or said no. You can back out and keep your earnest money. It's pretty fair to say. You should check on your insurance ASAP. I think we all know insurance has been a little bit tough lately. The buyer is going to work with the lender to make sure you have all of your documents, right? So, and I can't stress this enough, when the lender asks for something, get it to them as soon as possible. Any delay means a delay in you moving in on the day that you're planning on moving in on. And it could be as little as you just took too many days to get them the piece of paper that they needed early on. And that can be a tidal wave that backs things up for days. So it's really, you've got to just, as soon as they need something, get it. Even if you're like, they already asked for something like this, send it again. And if that's happening too much though, and I'm your agent, let me know because I want to know if they're kind of being silly. The lenders I work with don't do that. They ask for what they need. Occasionally things happen, but for the most part, it's going to be all on, they're not going to waste your time is what I'm trying to say. The seller's going to do a pest inspection for you. At least we're always going to ask for that. They're going to provide a report that is also for your approval. The seller is also going to provide their disclosures, what they know about the property, and they're going to provide a natural hazards disclosure report, which is done by a third party. And they're actually pretty interesting, believe it or not. They're like 70 pages, but I've actually read through them and they tell you a lot about the property and not just the natural hazards, earthquakes and floods and fire danger and all these other things. They also talk about Melrose, which is like property tax assessments and different things like that. They're interesting. Or I'm kind of a nerd, so maybe that's why I find them interesting. So also association documents. The seller will order the homeowners association documents from, or the seller will pay for them. Escrow will order them. Escrow will give them to you so that you can review them. And I really recommend reviewing them carefully. I know they're long, they're really long. But if it looks like the HOA does not have a lot of money, that's not a good sign. If you read through the meeting minutes and they're talking about doing a special assessment, like say it's a condo and the roof needs to be replaced. Well, the roof is owned by multiple condo owners, right? It goes over multiple units. So everybody has to chip in to pay for that roof. And the HOA has done a poor job of managing money. and they say, you know, this roof has to be replaced and it's going to cost $100,000 for all these roofs, and we have 70. So everybody who lives here is going to have to pony up that other 30 divided by X amount of people. And now you have a couple $1,000s that you owe. It does happen. It's very frustrating. And if you read the HOA documents up front, you're going to get an idea that that might be coming. Because sometimes, honestly, people say, well, the seller didn't tell me. The seller may not know. Honestly, a lot of the sellers, they're not paying attention. I hate to admit how many HOA meetings I have missed. And a lot of times when I'm on them, there's thousands of people who live and own in the community that I'm in, and there's 50 on the HOA Zoom. It's seriously, they really may not know. It's really, you want to make sure that you're reading through those. So those are the things that you get to review while you are waiting for your loan to go through. So as I said, escrow orders the HOA documents, if applicable. Not every place has an HOA here. Most do. Lender orders the appraisal. It can take several weeks to get that appraiser out there. So the lenders do try to do that as soon as possible. The appraisal report review. Did the appraisal come in low? Do we need to ask the seller to reduce the price because the appraisal came in low? They don't have to, by the way. So you could pay for an inspection and an appraisal, and then the appraisal comes in low, let's say $10,000, and the seller says, nope, I'm not reducing, I'm not doing it. Now, is that kind of dumb on their part? I think it is, because probably the next one's going to happen the same way. And if you're getting an FHA loan or VA, that could be incorrect, but I think it's VA too, that sticks with the property for months afterwards. So it's not like they can even get another FHA buyer. So that's something that the seller needs to keep in mind, but they can still say no. So if they say no, you could say, well, I'll cover the difference then. If you really want the house, it is your call. You can do that if you want. Maybe you guys come to some agreement, meeting in the middle. You cover 5, they cover 5. You just want to move on. You really want the house and you just want to keep going. Again, if they say, no, we won't do it, you also can just say, well, then give me my earnest money back and have a nice life. So you can do that too. So once the appropriate time frame comes around, now it is time for you to remove your contingencies. It's the right thing to do once everything has been agreed to, you've reviewed everything, you've read through the seller documents, all the stuff. Now, keep in mind, let's say you've read through all of the seller's disclosures and you're fine with them. So you're like, yeah, that's fine. I'll sign off on these. That's no problem. And you've signed off on everything. Everything's removed. All my contingencies are removed. And then the seller updates their disclosure. Oh, I forgot to tell you this. You actually have another 5 days to review those documents. Your contingency kind of comes back into play. The seller can't just like, yeah, oh, ha, you removed your contingency. Now I'm going to slip this thing in. No, the sellers would be wise to be very careful about the fact that they have disclosed everything up to that point. So, but otherwise, yes, time to remove the contingencies. It's now, if they didn't get you everything, don't remove them. You don't have the HOA documents yet to review, and it's day 17, don't remove them. I mean, that's how it works. So once you get them, then you still have 5 days to review them. That's per contract. So buyer gets the final loan approval. And let me back up real quick, because the contingency thing, I have seen in some cases where the people have removed their contingencies on advice and they didn't have everything yet. Well, that shouldn't happen. Just FYI, if you're moving along and somebody says, oh, hey, you should remove this contingency, and it's for the HOA doc, let's just use that again, and you say, I haven't seen the HOA documents yet. Oh, I know, but it's day 17 and you have to remove them. No, you do not. Do not remove them if you haven't seen what you are supposed to have seen. You have the right to review these. They're big. It's big deal stuff. So don't let anybody try to tell you that just because you're at day 17 that you have to remove them. If you don't have the information yet, no, you do not. Just FYI. The seller can't even try to force you to remove them. The way they do that is they give you a notice to perform. We've given you your time to review these things. Now you need to remove the contingency, or we can back out unilaterally. Again, I don't want to confuse the situation at this stage in the game. We talk about that in more detail if it comes up. but they can't do it if they haven't given you the information. So if it's something that the seller owes you, you don't have it yet. Now, if it's your inspection contingency and you just haven't gone and hired an inspector yet, well, that's on you. But if it's something the seller owes you, a termite report or something like that, no, you don't remove it. Don't remove it yet if you don't have it. Okay. Buyer gets final loan approval, signs closing disclosure, and ensures all amounts are as originally quoted. So the closing disclosure, or you will also hear it referred to as the CD. Once everything's kind of moving along, you're going to see this about day 25 or so. The lender, or sometimes sooner, some of my lenders are amazing. I can't believe when they get these things out. It's fantastic. They do such a good job. They're so efficient. But let's say about day 25, you get your CD, your closing disclosure. Everything is in order. Everything you were promised at the beginning is correct or better. Okay. So then you're able to go through and sign that. Now you can sign no sooner than 3 days after you've signed your closing disclosure. So you're hoping that you get that done with plenty of time to close on, let's say day 30 we're still on track for that. So you sign that. 3 days later, you go to escrow, you sit down with escrow, and you sign all of your loan documents, right? So you sign your closing disclosure, and then the lender gets all the loan documents ready, and then all of those loan documents get sent to escrow. Escrow receives them, they go through them, they work them up, as they say, so they get everything printed and ready for you to sign. Big stack of papers like this, you're going to sign, sign, sign. So you're going to probably have about an hour that you're either going to be signing at escrow, or you will have a mobile notary, which a lot of times here, that's how it happens because people are scattered all over the country who are buying here. They could be in LA, they could be in New York, they could be in Europe, but we get a mobile notary. Escrow manages that for you. They figure out where you're going to be. They have that mobile notary there for you to sign. You sign all the paperwork. That person gets everything back to the lender. The lender checks everything over. Hopefully everything got signed properly. They cross the T's and dot the I's. They make sure all of that is done. And then once they do, they send that money to escrow, right? So that's your money that you're borrowing. They send it over to escrow. So that is something that can, one little signature off or whatever can delay things. So you see how these delays can get, 1 day here, 3 days there, whatever, that can really back things up. So we also want to talk about what are your circumstances? Are you renting? Do you need to be out on a certain day? All these things are really important to discuss up front to make sure we have a buffer. I like a 2-week buffer. If I were you, I think it's worth overlapping a payment, to be perfectly honest. So moving right along, once escrow receives the buyer loan documents, again, they will call everybody in to sign. And then all the process that I was just describing goes through. And then what happens is you're going to sign whether with the mobile notary or at escrow, and that's not the day you close, right? So let's say you're signing on a Wednesday and you're closing on a Friday. You a lot of times can close on a Thursday too. Rarely are you going to, in California, sign and close the same day. You are probably going to close the next day or the day after that. And when you close, it is likely going to be late afternoon. So if you're planning on moving on Friday, or you're saying, hey, we're closing on Friday, let's get that moving truck, let's get on the road at 6 a.m. because we're going to move only half hour away. We're going to move everything in the morning. No, you're not. You're not. And it also depends on what the agreement was, of course, in the RPA, in the residential purchase agreement. But most of them say that it's going to, your possession of that property takes place on closing. Okay. So the closing, the recording typically happens in the afternoon, and it has to happen on a day that is not a holiday or a weekend, right? Because it's got to happen at the county's recording office. So that's the day. So let's say you signed everything on Wednesday and you're going to close on Friday. It may not happen until 4:59. I am kidding you not. I have been like right before I'm like, oh my God, is it done yet? So just know that that's what's going to happen. I like to try to see us close on a Tuesday or Wednesday so that if we do get backed up a couple of days, I'd love to see you signing on a Monday, closing on a Wednesday, even if you can't move till the weekend, because there's so many times that these things get pushed back a day or two. And if you get pushed back a day or two and you were supposed to close on Wednesday, but you close on Friday, it's probably fine because you're probably moving on the weekend anyway. But if you're supposed to close on Friday and anything goes wrong, because there's 10 different people working on this, then we can't control everything, then you can't move in until Monday. And maybe probably Monday night, or maybe Tuesday if it's a holiday. You get my drift. You've got to really consider the fact that you're going to want a buffer, because any little thing can go wrong, and you've got a rental truck sitting in your driveway, sitting at your apartment, sitting at your mom's house, wherever you've been staying, and you're just like, I can do nothing with this yet. So something to keep in mind. Now, let's talk about supplemental property taxes. This comes up a lot, especially when somebody has owned the home for a really long time, or it is new construction. So the way the property taxes in California work is, generally speaking, because I am not a tax expert, but I can share with you that the Prop 13, I think it's 13 from back in the day, says that the property taxes cannot go up more than 1 or 2% per year on your primary residence. Again, there's, check with your tax consultant. But if somebody's owned the property for a really long time, and let's just take my grandma as an example, who owned a piece of property up in Napa Valley for 50 years. Her taxes, even up until a couple years ago, until she passed, were little. They were tiny, because there's only so much they could go up. So the assessed value can only go up 1 or 2% per year, right? Not the tax, the assessed value. So if somebody's been living in their home a long time, the taxes could be really low. And then you're going to move in, and they're going to be, in our area, approximately 1.24% of your purchase price. Plus, there's usually some other fees. Mellow roofs, which is like an assessment, helps put in roads and traffic lights and things like that. And for instance, in our area, we have our sewer bill and our garbage and recycling. It's part of our property taxes. So all of that's already in there. Okay. So someone's been living in their home a long time, and their taxes are going to look much different than your taxes. And a lot of times what happens is they don't collect enough up front, so that when it comes time for you to pay your taxes in about a year or so, you could all of a sudden get this extra bill. And I can help you get a really good, very close idea of what that extra bill is going to be, so that you can set aside some money. So when that bill comes around, you'll know, oh, here it is, and here's the money, and I have it ready to go. I had all sorts of, I'm in a new construction property, and I have all sorts of neighbors. I didn't represent them because I didn't know them until we all moved in, who called me right around the time we all moved in a similar time, and we all got our special assessments. I had money set aside, and they're calling me going, what is this? I'm like, your agent didn't tell you? So set aside some money just in case. Now, if the person who owns it has only owned it for a few years, it's probably not going to be much different, and they'll probably collect the right amount. So something to keep in mind. And you know what? If it doesn't come, or the supplemental tax, it's a supplemental tax. If it's very low, great. Go spend the money on a vacation or a nice dinner. So we've talked about this. Do the final walkthrough within 5 days prior to closing. And I really would love to do it the day before or the day of, if possible. We do a final walkthrough. If you're not here, I'll do a video for you. I'll try to be as detailed as possible. It's actually how we found the fridge I was referencing earlier that wasn't in the garage when we moved in. It was how the buyers went, hey, where's that fridge? I have to admit, I didn't notice, but they did. They know what they're getting. And so as I was doing the video of everything, I went through the garage, I went through everything, right? And then they went, where's the fridge? So we were able to catch that prior to closing. All sorts of things can happen right before. So we definitely want to make sure that we go in there and make sure that everything's fine. And it normally is. Little things like that can happen. Closing will typically take place between 1 and 2 business days after signing. We've talked about that. Once closing happens, typically afternoon, then you get your keys. It's official. And if you're not in the area, I'll hang on to them for you and all the good stuff, right? We'll find a time to get them to you. So that is a little more robust, detailed version. Again, if you saw my earlier video, that's only about 5 minutes. This is obviously the longer version, but I hope this has help you understand how all this works, all the, interesting stuff about, well, again, I'm a nerd, so I find a lot of it interesting, but just the process, because I do feel like when buyers are well informed, then it's a much less stressful process. It's, people are like, we want to make this stress free. I would love to make this stress free for you. It's not going to be. Most people I know, best of circumstances, it can be a little stressful for any number of reasons. And a lot of it has to do with just moving and making a big purchase. I mean, I think it's kind of a normal reaction for your body to almost respond to that, like, I don't like this, So what we want to do though is we want to make sure that if you're prepared, if you your expectations are set properly, then at least as we go through this process, you're going to feel more at ease because you're going to be like, oh, I knew that was coming. Oh, I know that's going to happen. Yeah, I'm expecting to get these. Oh, and I'm expecting that we could have a few things that are going to delay us. I mean, plan on it. Plan on several days of delay. It happens all the time. And I just can't stress that enough. So, again, hopefully this does help it become a less stressful, maybe even enjoyable process. I mean, moving alone is never fun, even if you're not buying a house along with it. So if there's anything else, if you have any specific questions, you want to talk about your specific circumstances, anything that comes up, I just really want you to feel free to reach out to me, ask me anything you'd like. I'm more than happy to answer it. And hopefully this has helped. If even all it did was help somebody make sure that they got their final walkthrough somewhere in Texas and I had nothing to do with that deal, I'm going to be really happy if it saved you some heartache. So have a great day.